Okay, good morning. So we're up to Shin Yud Tes Seif Zayin, working through Hilchos Boireh. Says the Mechaber, Hoyu loy melilois me'erev Shabbos. So he had this grain, these sheaves, and you rub them together on Erev Shabbos. Lo yinafe bekonoin. You shouldn't sift them with a konoin, which is like some sort of koin. Pirush Rashi, kli reisha shereisha echad rochov. One end of the cone is wide, vasheni also kamin marzev, and the other end is thinner. Imagine a cone. For noisin akidnias bereisha rochov, and you put the kidneys in the wider end, and you sort of shake around the food, and then it filters through. So you've got a cone wide at the top and thin at the bottom. You can't do that. V'tamchui is like a large plate. Pirush ka'ara gedola. And these, in other words, the classic way of doing boireh is through a sieve or a strain or something like that. But a kanoin and a tamchui is a drabonadik, a form of boireh. So the Mechaber is saying in Zion that you can't use a konoin and a tamchui, which are drabonim ways of doing boireh. V'lo b'shtei yodov, nor can you use your two hands. Again, that's a form of boireh. But you can do it. You can sift with one hand, even with chol keicha, with all your might. That's allowed. Says the Mishnah Berurah Chof Hei, Melilas be'erev Shabbos, hu adin da'afilu im molam mi'at b'Shabbos. Even if you did a bit on Shabbos, gam kein mutzal nafech b'yodei achas, you'd be allowed to sift with one hand, uchud lekamei. V'hai d'nokam erev Shabbos, lashmein da'afilu haylo harbe melilos, gam kein mutzal nafech b'yodei achas. Even if you have a lot, you can do this with b'yodei achas. But why can't you do that? Because if we allow you to use a knoin and a tamchui, then you might come to use the nofa kvara, which is the deraisa ways of doing boireh. That's deraisa. V'lo b'shtei yodov, nor can you use two hands to do boireh. Dahainu ledabek b'shtei yodov ka'achas, i.e., you put your two hands together like that. V'likach b'shnei mal nafech, and then you sort of you do it that way. You sort of shift it around, and you let I guess you open your fingers a bit, and then the grain goes down, and you keep the chaff, something like that. So to take two hands and sort of to move it to this hand and then to that hand, and that way the chaff falls away and you've got the grain. That's also so. What the Mechaber essentially is saying in Zion is that Chazal will geyser various forms of boireh, otsu, that you might come to do the proper deraisa form of boireh. Fine.
This is all talking even
miyad biyad. Yeah. So in other words, you got three conditions. You got miyad, biyad, and somach l'suda. So the problem over here is biyad. In other words, you can only do it with your hands and not with some sort of instrument, not with what's it called, with a nof on a kvara. Nof on a kvara, which means the proper sieve and strainer, would be the issa deraisa of doing boireh. So you can be miyad for immediate use, and it can be oichem etoich pseilas. But if you're using a nof and a kvara, that is an issa deraisa. We're saying over here that not only nof and kvara is deraisa, but there are drabonadik forms of non-yad instruments which are problematic. For example, the konoin and the tamchui, and even two hands would be a problem. But one hand, so just like that, that's nothing.
So how then is a fork when you pick something out?
Because that's an extension of your hand.
So why is the sieve not got the same category as that?
Because it's not. It's the biyad. The third condition is literally your hand, or a fork, which is just an extension of your hand. You don't want to make your fingers dirty. It's easier to pick up the food. So that's just considered biyad. That's just an extension of your hand. Mashen kein, a sieve is a proper separating instrument. Yeah. Okay. Ches. Ein sheirin es hakashinin. You're not allowed to soak karshinin, pirush ha'orach v'yivitze belaz, some form of beans or something like that. Tahainu shemetzif ma'im alein. You pour water on top of them, b'kli kadei lehaser psoiles, so that way you can separate and remove the psoiles. V'lo shofen oson biyad, nor can you rub them with your hands kadei lehaser psoiles. Tavali kabeira. That's just another way of doing beira. Avol noisten b'chvara. You can take these karshinin and put them in a sieve. You can just store them there. You can just put them in there. Even though some of the chaff will go out through the sieve, that is allowed because that's not your kavana. Says the Mishnah Berurah Chav Ches, Ein Sheirin Hu Adinim Yesh Psoiles Va'Eichel Merav. If you got the two together, also litnim benat b'mayim, you can't put them in water. Kadei sheyipal psoiles lematzo could go in offer. Either you'll separate them because the psoiles is heavy, for example, offer, and it will sink to the bottom. Or if you've got straw in the mixture, and that will raise it to the top. But either way, putting them in water will somehow separate them. So that's not allowed. Hakarshinin hu meichel behema, it's animal fodder. V'hu adin tapuche adomo, or potatoes. You can't put them in a bucket of water, a bowl of water, to remove the dirt and the dust that's on them. Because that is not your intention. Okay. Okay, good. Tess. Mishameres, a strainer. Now, okay, we'll get there. Mishameres, a strainer. Afilu tzluim erev Shabbos. So even if it was hung on erev Shabbos, also litzim b'shmarim. On Shabbos itself, you can't put shmarim. Now, shmarim is the sediment of the wine, the bottom of the barrel. You've got bits of liquid, and you've got wine and grape skins and things like that. So it's all mixed up. So you can't put that in a strainer on Shabbos. But if you put the shmarim in the strainer on erev Shabbos, and then as Shabbos comes in, it's just it's continuing to strain. Afilu tzluim erev Shabbos. Sorry, erev Shabbos mutzah litin alem mayim kadei sheyachzru tzluim lozov. So if you put the shmarim there before Shabbos, and now you've got you want to just add a little bit of water to sort of separate and make the tzlulim, the clear water should come out, that would be okay. So not to put the shmarim in on Shabbos, but putting them in before Shabbos would be allowed. Says the Mishnah Berurah Mishameres, Kli shemesanin ba shmarim v'hayayin yered zach v'tzolol, and then it strains it, and the liquid, the wine, comes out clear and pure. Also, you can't put it on Shabbos in the strainer. Says the Mishnah Berurah, v'chiv chatzis nami yesh b'zeh. This is classic beira, Mishnah Berurah, shenivra ha'ich me'apsoilis al dezeh. So you're putting this mixture of shmarim, residue of grape skins, water, liquid, and a bit of grape and things like that in a strainer on Shabbos. That is classic beira. Tzlulim, rotzolem hashiyu hashmarim tzlulim. So what's this going on? This is going on, but you're allowed to put it in before Shabbos. Yeah. But if you put the shmarim before Shabbos, then then just to pour a bit of water over it, just to get rid of the liquid part of it, that would be allowed. That means that the shmarim would be clear. That would be allowed. So to put the shmarim in before Shabbos, okay. To put the shmarim in on Shabbos is not allowed. And even if you put the shmarim in before Shabbos, that would be okay. Even to add a bit of water on it on Shabbos. I can see you're perplexed. Yeah, we'll see in a second. V'atam she'ein l'sinas ma'im mishum beira. And the reason why putting the water on the shmarim that we'll put before Shabbos, and you're putting the water on Shabbos, that's not a problem of beira. Shamayim hu noisin stulunim, because the water that you're putting on is clear. Ve'ein boim davar tzarich levarim mehem. You don't need. There's not. Water comes in and water comes out. Mutzah litzem b'Shabbos mayim agab b'shmarim shenishar b'chavis v'kolton hamayim tamaya. And even though a bit of wine flavor comes out, that's allowed. And b'Shabbos you can drink it. Now you look perplexed, Eli. So others share your confusion. And if you look, which footnote is it? I think 35.
A good thing for tea.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So what's the difference? Where is it? I found it somewhere. Oh yeah. Look at 35. 35 is your question. V'hiksha prima godim. V'hiksha prima godim. V'af she'enu beres hamayim. Mikol makom beres hayayin. Sha'yadav or ma'urav mashmarim. So you're doing a ma'aser beres surely, because you're putting in water and a bit of wine is coming out, and therefore you are separating it. And they all very sort of struggle with this. But he goes, "V'tirs are reminiscent karelitz. Shekivin shema'at hayayin sheyetzi mashmarim me'orev. Sorry, misarev miyad b'mayim. Since it all mixes immediately into the water, Tafadu l'mayim ve'ein ze nechshav k'boira. The bottom line is that they ask you a question. It seems a bit strange. What's emerging from the Seif Tes is to put the shmarim in on Shabbos for sure is not allowed. To put the shmarim in before Shabbos is okay. And then he says you can actually add a bit of water on Shabbos itself just to wash it through. And what emerges is a bit of water with a bit of a wine taste. That's allowed. Why isn't that boir exactly? Again, the Achronim ask on that. It's unclear exactly. But you see, the Tafel, like Rabbi Zakar, it says, but so long as the Shmarim win before Shabbos, you'd be allowed to do that.
So technically, what is easier for tea? If you put tea bags in something and then you put the hot water on them and tea bags in there before Shabbos and then you've got...
Yeah, but I suppose...
We don't have the problem of Bishul.
Of what?
Bishul.
Of Bishul, yeah. So side and side there is a visual. I suppose that the difference is that here it's really a water that comes in and water that goes out. There's just a bit of wine flavour. There, it's proper tea that comes out. Yeah. Okay, Yud. Now this is very relevant, very interesting. What about filters on taps on Shabbos? Or what about orange juice? You know, your orange juice with bits in it, and you want to filter it to get it smooth. So what's the story there? So let's take a look. Yud. Yain oimayim shem stulim. If you've got wine or water which is clear, mutar l'sanim b'masharas, you can put them through a sieve. Says the Ramov, afal pishi yesh bei kasamin dakin. Even though, you know, nowadays our water and our liquids are so clear and so filtered that we don't really have this. But imagine you've got liquids where you've got wine or you've got water, where you've got kasamin, you know, homemade wine. You know, your own grapes, you press them yourself. There'll be bits of things in there. So you've got ksamin dakin, you've got slivers of wood. That's the key point. Since they were drinkable before, then the filtering is not considered a ma'aser boira, because it was orange juice before, it was orange juice afterwards, and therefore putting it through the strainer, you're not really doing anything because it was not a ma'aser boira of eichel p'tech is all eichel. Aval b'sudar. But using a suda is like a handkerchief. Mayim also mishum libun. If you want to put, say, for example, you've got a bowl and you've got a sheet or you've got some sort of a cloth on top of the bowl, and you pour the wine into it, and to keep out these kasom dakin, these slivers of wood, then that's not allowed. Not because of boira, but because of libun. Because when it comes, if the liquid you're pouring in is water, then the issue is not so much you want to just filter out the slivers of wood from the water. The issue is libun, because you're going to wash, you're going to launder the sheet, the handkerchief on top. The yain or shamashkin mutter, because that's not laundering. You're discoloring the handkerchief, the suda, and therefore there's no problem. The imheim achurim, if the water is very cloudy, bein ma'im bein yain, whether it's water or whether it's wine, osel sanam, then you can't strain them because that is you're doing a ma'aser boira. Okay, let's just do the Mishnah. Of colouring,
the red wine that's
on the thing, yeah, seemingly not. Yeah, good point. Not sure why not. Okay, says the Mishnah Berurah, Lama Daled, Mutter. So if you've got liquid yain or mayim, which are slulim, which are clear, but it's got a little bit of kasom dakin, you've got a little bit of impurities in it. Mutter lesanon b'mishmeres. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Lama Daled, given the belav hasinun gam kenim slulim v'rim lishtos, because even without the filtering, they're okay. Lochein ein b'zeh mishum boira. With stulim mikri kol sheroi lishtos kach b'li sinun l'roiv ne'odam. What is boira? What is stulim? When it's drinkable, but for most people, before that, most people would drink unfiltered water, let's say. V'yesh machmirin dedavka k'shekulim yochel nishles kach, when people could drink it like that. V'ein mesanel l'kedei stulim b'yoseh. Why are you filtering it? They should be a little bit purer or something like that. But you could drink it beforehand. V'chein mashke shkedim haksush me'er Shabbos. If you've got almond milk, which has been crushed from before Shabbos, mutar l'sanim Shabbos ha'dichel nishtois kach b'litzinen. So that's very, very interesting. So the Mishnah Berurah says if you've got almond juice, you crushed it before Shabbos. So nowadays you buy almond milk, it's pure as anything. You wouldn't find any bits in it. But back in the day where you crushed it yourself, you'll find bits in it. But if you could drink it beforehand, putting it through a strainer on Shabbos is okay. Now, if you look at note 38, he says that in the case of orange juice. Right? So say, for example, you buy a Tropicana with orange bits in it. And actually today, you know what, you think, I prefer it to have it straight without the bits in. Right? So it says 38, you got little bits of fruit in it. You're allowed to strain the orange juice or the fruit juice with bits in it, with bits of fruit in it, because since it was drinkable beforehand, before you sieved it. So it was eichel before, it was eichel afterwards. You haven't done a ma'aser boira. Amazing. Like I said, you're not separating 2 minim. Now that's fascinating, and the same is true when it comes with filtering liquids from taps. And most of our taps have a little filter on top of the tap, the faucet. So this is what Simcha Bunim Kohen says. We have seen that filtering liquids to remove impurities is a form of boira. That's what we've been discussing. A liquid that is fully drinkable, in spite of its impurities, right, may be filtered in order to obtain an even more purified state. For since the impurities do not reduce the liquid's drinkability, they are considered to be part of the liquid itself and not a separate species. Therefore, their removal does not constitute an act of boira.
Even if you would never, let's say, drink orange juice with bits,
Oh, good. For this reason, the use of a specialized filter on the kitchen sink is permitted unless the water is actually impure. However, a finicky individual who is disturbed by even minor impurities may not filter out these impurities on Shabbos, because to such an individual this constitutes a constructive act of boireh. Another person is equally forbidden from filtering liquids on behalf of that finicky individual. Okay? So, in other words, if, let's say you and me, I sometimes like orange juice with bits, without bits, I'm not that fussed. So if, I have the orange juice with bits, most people can drink it like that. If I decide today, actually I fancy just have it without the bits. So then, to drink it, to pour it through a sieve, and then to drink the pure one, that's okay. It's not a ma'aser boira. And so too, if you've got a faucet, a tap, where you've got this little filter on it, again, I would drink it without the filter, because it's pretty pure without it, and it's just a bit more pure if I keep the filter on. So if I do that, that's not considered a ma'aser boira. But if you're a particularly finicky individual, I can never drink Tropicana with bits in it, so then you've got a problem. Yeah. Okay, let's just finish off this sieve. Lamed Hey, Ksomin Dakin, so you've got bits of impurities in the water. Issa Besmag, Ksas Ksomin, Vakavona Dilo Harbe, if you've got loads of impurities, loads of bits of wood in it, Ein Roy Lishtes Kach Lerevin Eldam, then you've got a problem. Vuadinim Yesh Bahayayin, Ksas Kamochin, you've got a bit of flour or whatever. It all depends on whether it was drinkable beforehand. However, but doing it in a sudar, putting a handkerchief over the bowl, that's a separate problem of libun. Says the Mishnah Berurah Lamed Vav, also lesanin afilu mayim tzlulin negamrei or mari b'sheino emed muchen lekach the ilav hochi dina k'mashmeres. If it was designated for this use, then you haven't got a problem, because it's got a din of mashmeres, and you haven't got a problem of sieving, because you're not going to come to squeeze it, because this is its designated purpose. Mishum libun t'shriyoso zeh kiboso, saturating this cloth is a form of laundering. Chen kosav beis Yosef b'ved divrei hatur. V'mogen Avram v'agra. They conclude that we don't say because there's no dirt on it. And you only say when the thing's dirty. The problem here is you might come to do schita, as opposed to a designated strainer. You're not going to come to squeeze it, because you're not doing libun. That's its function. However, yayin would be okay, because you're not doing libun. Says the Mishnah Berurah Lamed Ches, Midas Hataz lekaman b'soif siman shinchaf mashma d'soif davka b'yayin odoim, red wine. Avol b'yayin lovon, white wine, also lesanin k'moi mayim. Then because white wine could clean it, it could launder it. Avol eli rabba chelik olov, and you don't launder with wine, you launder with water, and therefore he says it would be okay. Lamed Tes Mutza. D'lo shaykh b'shem yischet she'ein habeged mischabes u'mislaben al yodom. Va'afilim timtzulem d'gam al yodom mislaben k'tzas. Even if it's going to become a little bit laundered, mikol makom lo chashin l'schita de'ein cheshish l'sochtom de'ein yochel l'kanekis u'merechu v'chazuso v'letzorich mashka b'lu gam kein ein derech l'sochtom. You don't really clean it with wine, and therefore we're not really worried about that. Mem also l'sananom. But however the liquid was achurim, then whether it's water, whether it's wine, also l'sananom, says the Mishnah Berurah Mishum Boira, bein b'mashmeres, bein b'sudurim, however you do it, whether it's a proper sieve or whether it's just a bit of a cloth, That no one would drink it like this. Because if it was a little bit cloudy, the water or the wine, and you could drink it, then you can only be a problem if you use a proper sieve. If it's a little bit cloudy, then to use a cloth would be okay because it's not a proper sinun. Okay, now finishing off the Mechaber, Ula Rambam with the second line of the Mechaber. Ula Rambam, but Mishmeres Osa, he is stricter, and he says that a Mashmeres is going to be Osa. Even if the water or the wine is clear, and they only allow sudarin if the water is clear. If it's in its formative stage, a kolzman shel toises is like bubbling. Pirushanir kureseach toireaf chovis mishmeres v'noisen l'soich hasuda. Then you can. It says Mishnah Berurah, Memalef u'larambam mishmeres tamanira mishum shelo yaseh kederech shu oise b'chol u'ledina halacha keder rishayna. Okay, v'loi ba'achurim hainu af ba'achurim k'tzas, even if they're a little bit cloudy. Ti'ilu ba'achurim legamri hal after der rishayna also. Even the first opinion. The brought by in the Chaber would be Asa v'chanal, or v'zeh tov lochash l'tivei Rambam. V'yayin megitay pirush she'oz kol hayenes achurin. Then all the liquid is cloudy. V'sheisno som mishmeren ein kan tikun to belav hochi mishtasi v'alkein afilu kashul toifa v'naseh achur. Even if you sort of shake it around, it becomes cloudy. Katzol adom, it's got a din of tzolol. L'toicha suda v'zeh d'das Rambam l'der rishena afilu mashmer shari. The first opinion would say that this sieve would be okay. Let's just do one line more. Yud Aleph. When you strain the wine in a sudar, you shouldn't have a cavity in the gumar in the wine. Mishum shinui says Mishnah Berurah b'suda rotzolei mamashke ochur k'tzas avul kashemesanin b'yayin solol mutar letzanim b'shemeres ach b'suda ein tzorech shum shinui, and with it you don't need to do a shinui. What's the problem of shinui? Shelo yaseh k'uvdin dechol. That when you're doing this procedure, when you're straining wine using some sort of material, make sure you don't do some sort of cavity, because that's the way you would do it during the week, and you should use some sort of shinui. So the main point that has emerged from today is that using a filter on a tap, on a faucet, is actually allowed for the vast majority of people, because it's not a ma'aseh. You could drink it beforehand, you can drink it afterwards. It's just a slight improvement in the purity of the water. And so too when it comes to fruit juice, where you've got bits of fruit in it. If I would drink it beforehand and I would drink it afterwards, it's not really a ma'aseh. If you have a finicky individual who wouldn't, then it would be different. And I can't even do that for a finicky individual because it's a ma'aseh. Yeah, go on.
And somebody was funny, but can you do it for other people that they would?
I don't know, because for him it's a ma'aseh b'sama. If he's not partaking of it, he's doing for others who are not, then maybe, yeah. Okay, let's say that.